"Oh God, Olivia, who did this to you?" That was the moment my life split cleanly in two before I opened the garage door, and after. I am a mother, 56 years old, and I had just come home from Hawaii, where I spent 3 endless weeks sleeping in a hospital chair beside my husband while poison dripped slowly into his veins in the name of saving his life. Cancer changes time. Days stretch. Nights feel eternal. When Paul finally insisted I go home to check on the house and rest, I believed him. I believed that everything waiting for me in Arizona would still be intact, ordinary, safe. I was wrong. That's when I noticed it. Julia's car, my younger sister's silver sedan, sat in the driveway like it belonged there. It didn't. Julia hadn't lived with us in years. We were close once, but the last year had changed things. She'd fallen into a financial black hole, divorce, job loss, unpaid debts. I'd helped. God knows I had. Groceries, rent, lawyer fees. But she'd become distant, moody, cagey. Still, she was my sister. I entered the house to a scene of confusion. Drawers open, papers scattered, a shattered vase by the couch. My heart stuttered. I called out, "Olivia?" No answer. A muffled sound drew me toward the garage. It was locked odd. I never locked that door. My hands fumbled for the old brass key, and as soon as I turned the lock, the stench hit me. Sweat, urine, decay. I flicked on the light and froze. Olivia. My daughter. 17. My baby. Tied, bound, gagged, slumped against the wall like discarded furniture. Her wrists were swollen, her lips cracked, her skin a sickly gray under the fluorescent flicker. "Oh God, Olivia, who did this to you?" I ran to her, tore the tape from her mouth as gently as I could. She gasped, trying to speak, trying to breathe. "Water," she croaked. I flew back into the kitchen, snatching the nearest bottle from the fridge. When I returned, she drank in frantic gulps, water spilling from her chin, hands shaking violently. "I'm here," I whispered, cutting the zip ties from her wrists. "I'm here, baby, I've got you." Then I heard the voice behind me. "Well, look who finally showed up." I froze. That voice. No. Before I could turn, something heavy struck the back of my head. I collapsed to the floor beside Olivia, dazed, pain ringing through my skull. The bottle rolled from my hand. I looked up, vision blurred, and saw her. Julia, my sister. She stood there in my garage, disheveled, wild-eyed, holding a metal wrench. Her face was twisted with something I didn't recognize: rage, resentment, satisfaction. "You never change, do you, Linda?" she spat. "Always the perfect one, the saint, everyone's little angel. You left me crumbs while you built this whole ing life." My hands reached for Olivia. She whimpered. Julia stepped closer. "You call the cops, she dies?" she snarled. "Don't test me." I choked on my own breath. "Why, Julia? Why would you do this?" "For once," she hissed, "I'm taking what I deserve." I blinked through tears, trying to sit up. "You're my sister. We were kids together. You used to read Olivia bedtime stories. What happened to you?" Her laugh was sharp and cold. "What happened? You kept everything. The house, the money, the family. You were born lucky. I was born inconvenient." I couldn't comprehend the venom, the betrayal. I reached toward her, pleading, "Please, let her go. We can work something out. I'll give you money, a share of the house, a start-over fund, whatever you need." Julia crouched down, inches from my face. "A share?" she scoffed. "You don't get it, do you? I don't want a piece. I want it all." I frowned. She stood, brushing invisible dust from her jeans. "And I was this close to getting it," she said, glancing at Olivia. "She was supposed to sign the transfer today, but you had to come home early, didn't you?" She turned, walking toward the door, and paused. "Enjoy the mess, but remember, say one word to the police, and you'll regret it." Then she was gone. I crawled toward my daughter, hands still trembling, brain reeling. The garage felt colder than before, even in the summer heat. I pressed Olivia's face to my shoulder and whispered through my tears, "I'm so sorry, baby. I didn't see it. I didn't see any of it. But I would now." And whatever Julia had planned next, she would never get another chance. Not with my daughter. Not with me. If this story moved you, Tap like and comment where you're watching from. Someone nearby might be watching with you too. The moment Julia walked out that garage door, everything in me screamed to chase after her, but Olivia moaned softly beside me, and that one sound anchored me in place. My daughter needed me more than my rage did. I reached for my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. My voice cracked as I gave the address, and the dispatcher's tone shifted instantly from routine to urgent when I said, "My daughter's been held captive for 7 days in our garage. She's 17. She's barely conscious." I didn't mention Julia, not yet. I wasn't ready to say the words out loud. I wasn't ready to admit that my own sister had turned into a monster. The dispatcher told me help was on the way and instructed me to keep Olivia awake if I could. I dropped the phone on speaker, crouched beside her, and gently stroked her sweat-drenched hair. "Baby, stay with me. Talk to me," I whispered. "It's going to be okay." She blinked slowly, lips still cracked and trembling. "Mom, I was so scared." I know, sweetheart." My eyes burned. "I'm here now. You're safe." The paramedics arrived within minutes, 2 men and a woman. All business, all compassion. They lifted Olivia with practiced care onto a stretcher, attaching monitors, placing oxygen under her nose. One of them, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, looked at me with a soft but grim expression. "She's severely dehydrated, low blood pressure. She needs fluids immediately. We'll take her to Banner Desert. You can ride up front with us." I nodded quickly, grabbing my purse with one hand and squeezing Olivia's with the other. As they wheeled her out, I caught a glimpse of her eyes flickering open, searching for me. "I'm here," I told her again. "I'm not leaving you." The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens, questions, and me repeating her name over and over like a prayer. At the hospital, a young ER doctor named Dr. Amani took over, his expression tightening as he read her vitals. "She's critical but stable. We're starting IV fluids, antibiotics, and running labs. If she'd been in that garage any longer." He didn't finish the sentence. I followed the stretcher until a nurse gently pulled me back. "You'll have to wait here, ma'am. We'll update you as soon as we can." I stood frozen in the hallway, Olivia's empty sneaker in my hand, dirt-streaked and worn. I hadn't even realized I picked it up from the garage floor. That's when a calm, clipped voice broke through the chaos. "Mrs. Brennan? I'm Detective Lisa Morrison. I understand you were the one who found your daughter?" She was mid-40s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense presence. Her badge hung from a lanyard around her neck, her notebook already open. I nodded numbly. Yes, I found her." "In your garage?" "Yes. Bound, gagged. She said she'd been there for a week." "Did she say who did this?" I hesitated for a second too long. She said, "My sister, Julia." Morrison's pen froze mid-sentence. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, just processed. "Your sister, full name, Julia Brennan. She used to live with us, years ago. She's had a rough few years." Morrison nodded slowly, scribbling as she spoke. "Where is she now?" I don't know. She was at the house when I got there. She hit me, threatened me, told me not to call the police or she'd—" My voice cracked. "She said she'd kill Olivia. Tell you stay. I have Andras down and backed." The detective looked up. "All business. We're going to treat this as an abduction and unlawful imprisonment, and if what you're saying is accurate, and I believe it is, we may be looking at attempted murder." Attempted murder. The words knocked the breath out of me. "She's my sister," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "She may be your sister," Morrison said gently, "but she locked your minor daughter in a garage for 7 days during the hottest month of the year in Arizona. That's not sisterhood, that's a crime." I sank into a nearby chair, shaking. I thought about all the ways I had tried to help Julia over the years, the rent payments, the late-night phone calls, the Christmas mornings where I made sure she had gifts under the tree, even if she couldn't afford them herself. I thought about how she used to sing Olivia to sleep when I worked double shifts as a nurse. How she once told me Olivia was the closest thing she'd ever had to a child of her own. And now this. "I don't understand," I said. "Why would she do this?" Morrison's voice was level. "That's what we're going to find out." She took my statement in full, every detail I could remember, from seeing Julia's car in the driveway to the moment she disappeared. I told her about the garage, the blow to the head, the threats. The detective asked if anything in the house seemed disturbed. I paused. Yes, papers, legal documents. My financial folders were open, my husband's will, my deed. Morrison's eyes narrowed. We'll send a team to secure your property. Do you have any reason to believe your sister might have been attempting to access your assets? I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. She used to ask for money, said she needed help, but I never imagined she'd. The words failed me. I understand, Morrison said. We'll look into every angle, but for now, you need to stay with your daughter. End quote. Is she going to be okay? She's strong, the detective said, and she's lucky. You came home in time. I stayed at the hospital the rest of the night, curled up in a chair by Olivia's bed. She didn't wake again, but I held her hand and watched the IV drip slowly, steadily into her arm. Outside, the Arizona night was still and dark. Inside, the only sound was the soft beeping of monitors. My phone buzzed. One message. No caller ID. It read, "You should have listened. Now it's too late." End quote. Jeaning Rate Manders. I stared at it, hands cold. Julia wasn't gone. She was watching. I stared at the message on my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. The words burned. You should have listened. Now it's too late. My stomach twisted. Julia wasn't just out there, she was nearby. And worse, she was still playing games. Watching. Waiting. I flagged down the nurse at the station. I need to speak to Detective Morrison, I said, barely hiding the tremble in my voice. It's urgent. She needs to see this. Thanks for watching. The nurse nodded and picked up the phone. Less than 10 minutes later, Morrison returned, walking briskly down the corridor in jeans and a blazer, her badge clipped to her belt. She didn't waste time. What happened? She asked. I handed her my phone. Her eyes scanned the message. She took a sharp breath, then immediately started typing something into her own device. This number, did it send anything else? Do you recognize it? No, I whispered. Blocked. No ID. But it's her. I know it. 84. We'll trace it, she said. It might take time, but if she's using a burner phone, we'll still have options. Geopings, traffic cams, bank transactions. We'll find her. I looked through the window at Olivia, still unconscious, hooked up to IVs and heart monitors. Her face was pale, lips dry and cracked, like a flower left too long in the sun. I couldn't shake the thought that Julia had come back, that maybe she'd never really left. She's threatened Olivia once, I said. What if she tries again? She won't get near your daughter, Morrison assured me. We'll put officers outside the room, and I'm assigning protection to your home, too. Julia made this personal. We're treating it that way. But why? I asked again, tears welling. Why would she do this to us? Morrison's expression softened. Because people like your sister convince themselves they're owed something. They tell themselves a story where they're the victim, and everyone else, especially the people who've helped them, is the villain. I looked down. I offered her help. Even yesterday, when she hit me, I offered to give her something, a share of the house, anything just to keep Olivia safe. She didn't want a share, Morrison said. She wanted everything. I nodded slowly. That was exactly it. Julia didn't want fairness. She wanted revenge dressed up as justice. By morning, Olivia stirred. It was subtle. Her hand tightened around mine, her eyelids fluttered, and then her voice came out dry and cracked. Mom? I jumped up, cupping her face with my hands. Olivia, baby, I'm here. You're safe. She blinked slowly, taking in the room. Hospital? Yes, I nodded. You're okay. They're taking care of you. Her face crumpled, and her body shook with quiet sobs. I thought I was going to die, she whispered. I thought you'd never come back. And Crease. I pressed my forehead to hers. I'm so sorry. I didn't know she'd... Her voice was hoarse but steady. She said you abandoned me, that you chose Dad and left me behind. She lied, baby. I would never. I know, Olivia whispered. I know now. But she told me I'd never leave that garage unless I signed. I leaned back, staring into her eyes. Signed what? She brought papers, every day, said they were legal documents. She said if I just signed them, she'd let me go. No way. My heart sank. Did you? No, I refused. I told her I'd rather die than sign something without you or Dad knowing. That's when she stopped bringing food. Or water. Morrison entered then, having waited outside until Olivia was stable. Olivia, I'm Detective Morrison, she said gently. I need to ask you a few questions, but only if you're up to it. Olivia looked to me, then nodded faintly. Morrison pulled up a chair and spoke in a low, even voice. Do you remember when your aunt first came to the house? I think 2 days after Mom left. She said she was there to check on things. Did she mention any plans? Anything unusual? She said she was staying to handle business. And then she started locking the garage. Said it was to keep me safe. I didn't understand. And when did she lock you in? About a week ago. She tricked me. Said she found a box of Dad's things and wanted to show me something. There was a glass of lemonade. I woke up tied up. My chest tightened as Olivia's voice trembled. Morrison kept her expression calm but wrote furiously in her notebook. Did she ever mention anyone else helping her? Olivia frowned. She was always on her phone, texting someone named Carlos. She called him her exit plan. Said once everything was signed and transferred, they'd be gone for good. Carlos, Morrison repeated. Do you know anything else about him? She showed me a photo once. A man mid-30s maybe? Tattoos. I didn't recognize him. Morrison nodded slowly. That helps. Thank you. She stood. We'll run facial recognition, and we'll pull financial records, see if your aunt was transferring assets or forging documents. After she left, Olivia looked at me with fear in her eyes. Mom, what if she comes back? She won't, I said firmly, brushing her hair back. She'll never touch you again. I promise. But in my heart, I wasn't sure. Julia had already broken every rule of family, every thread of love and trust. And people like that don't stop until someone stops them. By the 3rd day, the hospital room had become our entire world. Machines hummed softly around Olivia, their steady rhythm both comforting and terrifying. Every beep reminded me how close I had come to losing her. She slept most of the time, her body slowly rehydrating, color returning to her cheeks in fragile increments. When she woke, she clung to my hand like she was afraid I might disappear again. I didn't blame her. I was afraid of disappearing too. Detective Morrison came back that morning with 2 uniformed officers. She closed the door behind her, her expression careful but firm, the look of someone about to confirm your worst fears. We've gone through your house, she said. Every room, garage included, and we've started reviewing your financial records. I braced myself. Tell me, your sister didn't just hold your daughter, Morrison continued. She was preparing to take everything. She slid a thin folder onto the bedside table. Inside were copies of documents. I recognized immediately my mortgage papers, bank statements, insurance policies, my husband's medical power of attorney. Some pages had sticky notes attached. Others had sections highlighted in neon yellow. She forged a temporary power of attorney in your name, Morrison said. It's sloppy, but dangerous enough to cause serious damage if filed. She also attempted to initiate wire transfers from your savings account. One went through. My vision blurred. How much? $120,000, she said quietly, transferred to an intermediary account. We froze the rest. I felt sick. That money wasn't excess. It was Paul's treatment fund, our safety net, our future. She planned to sell your house, Morrison continued, and the property you inherited from your parents. Both deeds were being prepared for transfer. Your daughter's signature was meant to legitimize part of that process. I looked at Olivia, still sleeping, and imagined Julia standing over her with papers while she lay bound and terrified. My hands curled into fists. She used my child as leverage, I whispered. Yes, Morrison said. And based on the messages we recovered, she believed she was running out of time. Your early return disrupted her plan. I swallowed hard. Carlos? Morrison nodded. We confirmed him. Carlos Rivera, 34. Prior fraud charges in New Mexico. He and your sister exchanged hundreds of messages over the last 2 months. They were planning to leave the country within days. I closed my eyes. I thought of Julia's laugh in the garage, the way she'd sneered when I begged her. I don't want a piece. I want it all. Have you found her? I asked. Not yet, Morrison admitted. But we're close. Credit card pings, license plate readers, traffic cams. She's moving, but she's not as smart as she thinks. After the officers left, I sat alone with my thoughts while Olivia slept. The silence was heavy, broken only by the faint hiss of oxygen. I replayed my entire life with Julia, searching for the moment this version of her was born. We were only 16 months apart. Our mother used to dress us alike and call us her twin hearts. Julia was always louder, more impulsive. I was the careful one, the responsible one. When Dad died, Julia spiraled. When Mom followed years later, I became the default anchor, the one with the house, the job, the stable marriage. I thought I was helping her by being steady. Maybe she thought I was punishing her just by existing. That afternoon, Olivia woke again, her eyes clearer this time. "Mom," she said softly. "Did the police say anything?" I hesitated, then sat beside her. They did. Aunt Julia was trying to steal the house, and our money. She planned to leave the country. Olivia stared at the ceiling. "So I was just part of the plan?" "No," I said fiercely. "You were never just anything. You were her excuse." She turned her head toward me. She kept saying you always chose everyone else over her, that she deserved something back. I felt a sharp, familiar guilt, but it died quickly. "Loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing your child," I said. "And it doesn't mean excusing cruelty." Olivia was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, "I don't think I'll ever trust her again." "You don't have to," I said. "You don't owe her anything. Not your forgiveness. Not your silence." That evening, Paul called from Hawaii. His voice was weak, but steady. "How's my girl?" he asked. "She's healing," I said. "Slowly. She's strong." There was a pause. "Linda," the nurse told me what happened. I closed my eyes. "I'm so sorry." "Don't," he said. "Just bring her home when you can. Both of you. We'll get through this together." When I hung up, I felt something settle inside me, not peace, but resolve. Julia had tried to take my family apart piece by piece. She had underestimated one thing. I was still standing, and I wasn't done fighting. 2 days later, Olivia was discharged from the hospital. Her body was healing, but her spirit, that was another story. She barely spoke as I wheeled her out through the automatic glass doors, a pair of sunglasses shielding her tired eyes from the Arizona sun. Her hand clutched mine like a lifeline. The Olivia I knew, witty, sharp, fiercely independent, was buried somewhere beneath a new layer of silence and guarded stares. I opened the car door and helped her into the passenger seat, adjusting the seatbelt like I used to when she was a little girl. She didn't protest. That scared me more than anything. We drove home with a police escort, per Detective Morrison's orders. A patrol car would remain parked outside our house for as long as necessary. I appreciated it, though the sight of it in our driveway made everything feel less like safety and more like a scene still unraveling. When we pulled up to the house, Olivia flinched. "I don't want to go inside," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I turned to her, heartbreaking. "Sweetheart, you don't have to go near the garage. We'll stay in the living room, or I can take you somewhere else. A hotel, your Aunt Lily's, anywhere you feel safe." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Just not the garage, please." "Of course." I helped her inside, guiding her straight to the couch, piling pillows and blankets around her like a makeshift fortress. I brought her tea, toast, and one of Paul's old flannel shirts she always loved to steal. She wrapped it around herself and curled up, silent, eyes fixed on the blank television screen. I stood back and looked around the house. Julia's fingerprints were everywhere, figuratively and literally. The living room, still cluttered from the day I found Olivia, was a mess of rifled papers, open drawers, broken picture frames. My financial documents had been dumped onto the coffee table like trash. A photo of Paul and me from our 25th anniversary lay cracked on the floor, the glass spiderwebbed, Julia's heel print in the corner. It wasn't just robbery. It was a violation. A war on memory. Later that evening, Morrison stopped by in person. She brought more documents, printed emails, and photocopied texts pulled from Julia's cloud backups. She'd made the mistake of syncing her messages before switching phones. "We've confirmed the full scope," Morrison said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "Julia forged your signature on at least 3 property documents. She tried to access a trust account in your name, and she applied for 2 lines of credit using your social security number." "Identity theft," I whispered. Among other things, she nodded. We're building a case for fraud, elder abuse since she targeted both you and your daughter and attempted unlawful transfer of assets. Inexperience. Attempted murder? I asked, my throat dry. Morrison hesitated. We're pushing for it, but that charge is tricky. Her defense will argue she gave Olivia water, food, that she never intended for her to die. She locked her in a garage in Phoenix, in August, for a week. I agree, she said. But juries can be unpredictable, especially with family cases. People don't want to believe someone would do this to their own blood. She already did. Morrison nodded solemnly. She handed me another document text threads between Julia and Carlos. Lines of code and cruelty. She'll break soon. Then we file. Then Mexico. She's 17. We'll say it was discipline. She's a liar like her mom. Linda's soft. She'll give in. She always does. I stared at the words, bile rising in my throat. She thought I was soft. She thought wrong, Morrison said. She stood, tucking her notebook back into her satchel. We're close. Julia's last known location was in Flagstaff. We think she's circling, avoiding highways. We've flagged her car, her license, even her tattoos. She's got the hawk on her left shoulder, I added. She got it after college. Exactly. We're watching bus stations, cheap motels, gas station footage. If she tries to cross the border, we'll catch her. And Carlos? We're working on him too. If he's smart, he'll keep running. If he's stupid, he'll come back for her. I have contrast. Morrison looked toward the living room, where Olivia was dozing beneath Paul's shirt, still pale and drawn. I've worked dozens of cases like this, she said, but it's different when it's family. The betrayal cuts deeper. The damage lasts longer. I nodded. She was my sister. She still is, Morrison corrected. That's the worst part. After she left, I sat beside Olivia and stroked her hair while she slept. Her breathing was soft, even. The tension in her shoulders had eased, if only slightly. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "We're going to be okay." But I wasn't sure I believed it yet. In the dark, I looked toward the garage door. The lock was changed, the key removed, but it still sat there innocent, ordinary, guarding the space where my daughter had been left to die. And I knew I wouldn't rest until Julia was behind bars. By the end of the week, the house still didn't feel like home. I tried to make things normal, whatever that meant now. I cooked Olivia's favorite meals: grilled cheese on sourdough, chicken noodle soup from scratch, the chocolate chip pancakes we used to make every Sunday when she was little. She ate in small bites, mechanically, like she was going through the motions of being okay. Sometimes she spoke. Most times, she didn't. She refused to sleep in her bedroom upstairs. The room was too close to the garage, too close to the memory. I set up the guest room for her, moved a nightlight in, kept the door open. Every night, I heard her stir. At 3 a.m., I'd find her sitting upright, knees pulled to her chest, eyes wide and awake. "I keep dreaming she comes back," she whispered once, "that I wake up and I'm back in the dark, tied up again." I pulled her into my arms. "She's not coming back, baby. I won't let her." I meant it. I spent my days cleaning the destruction Julia left behind. I couldn't scrub the smell out of the garage, no matter how many cleaners I used. I replaced the light bulbs. I boxed up Paul's tools. I repainted the walls, covered the dark stains. But Olivia wouldn't step foot near the door. Neither would I, if I'm honest. Meanwhile, Morrison kept in touch. On Thursday morning, she called. "We've found her," she said. My heart skipped. "Where?" "A motel just outside Sedona. She paid in cash. Carlos was with her." End quote. I leaned against the counter, gripping the phone. "Did you get them? We're preparing to move in this afternoon. Quietly. No one gets hurt. We want them alive, cooperative, and talking." "What happens after?" "There'll be an arrest, arraignment, bail hearing. We'll build the case, and we'll need your full cooperation. Olivia too, eventually." "I'll do whatever you need," I said. "We both will." I hung up and sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the mug in my hand. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt hollow. By dinner, Morrison called again. "They're in custody." The words hit like a brick wall final, but somehow unreal. "Was there any trouble?" "No," Julia was caught off guard. "Carlos tried to run. We got him within minutes." Is she talking? She will be. We have enough to keep them both. Tomorrow they'll be arraigned in Phoenix, bail hearing the following morning. I was airy man it is. I thanked her, hung up, and walked into the living room where Olivia sat curled up, reading. They found her, I said quietly. Olivia didn't look up. Good. She's being charged. Olivia's fingers tensed around the spine of the book. Is it bad that I want her to rot? No, I said. It's human. She closed the book and looked at me. I used to think she loved me, that I was special to her. You were, in your own way. Then why did she do it? I sat beside her. Because people who are broken sometimes try to break others to feel whole again. That doesn't make it okay. It just makes it tragic. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat like that until the sun set. The next morning, Morrison invited me to attend the arraignment. I wasn't sure I was ready, but I went. I needed to see it. I needed to face her. The courthouse was cold, sterile, the kind of place that pretends to offer justice, but mostly delivers procedure. I sat in the second row behind the prosecution's table, hands folded in my lap, every muscle tight. Then Julia was brought in. She wore an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back, eyes hollow. She looked older, thinner, harsher. But when she saw me, her lips curled into the faintest smirk. It made my blood run cold. The judge read the charges. Attempted murder, kidnapping, fraud, identity theft, financial exploitation, and conspiracy. Her public defender argued for bail. The prosecution laid out everything Olivia's condition, the forged documents, the offshore accounts, the text messages. Morrison testified briefly, explaining the physical evidence and the scope of Julia's financial scheme. The judge didn't hesitate. Bail is set at $500,000. Next hearing will be scheduled within 10 days. Julia was escorted out. She didn't look back. Outside the courthouse, I stood with Morrison on the steps. She's going to fight this, Morrison said. She'll claim diminished capacity, addiction, desperation. Her lawyer will try to make you the villain. Let them try, I said. The truth's uglier than anything they can spin. Morrison nodded. We're ready. I drove home and found Olivia in the kitchen, making tea. She looked up at me. Well? She's not getting out anytime soon. Olivia took a long breath. Good. We didn't talk more about it that night. We sat on the porch instead, wrapped in blankets, watching the desert sky melt from amber to indigo. A calm night. A silent one. But beneath that silence, something stirred, not fear, not grief, something stronger. Resolve. 3 days after the arraignment, Olivia asked to see the garage. I just poured her a cup of chamomile tea when she said it, her voice soft but steady. I froze mid-motion, the spoon in my hand hovering over the honey jar. You don't have to, I said quickly, gently. There's no rush. She looked up at me, her expression unreadable. I need to. I searched her face for hesitation, but all I saw was quiet determination, the same look she used to get before piano recitals or final exams. Only this time, it wasn't about performance. It was about reclaiming something. So I set the tea down and nodded. Okay. The garage door creaked open slowly, sunlight spilling across the concrete floor. I'd scrubbed every inch of it, repainted the walls, replaced the bulb with a soft LED glow, laid down a new mat near the entryway. But no amount of elbow grease could erase the shadows from our minds. Olivia stepped inside slowly, her arms folded across her chest, shoulders tight. She looked smaller in the space, fragile, almost. But her feet moved forward, one step at a time, until she stood in the far corner near the workbench, the place where I found her, where she nearly died. She touched the wall. I counted this crack, she said, her finger brushing a jagged line in the concrete, over and over, like if I counted it enough times, I wouldn't disappear. My chest ached. She turned toward me. She said if I just signed the paper, it would all be over. I'd be free. What paper? I asked, even though I knew. The deed. To this house. She said she'd already filed one for Grandma's house. Said this one was the last piece. And you didn't sign. Dater. I have Crees no in a Stargate. Olivia shook her head. I told her no every time, even when I thought I wouldn't make it. I felt pride and sorrow war in my chest. You were braver than anyone should ever have to be. She looked around one last time. "Can we get rid of the workbench?" "Yes," I said. "We'll burn it if you want." She almost smiled. Almost. We left the garage together, and that night for the first time she slept through the entire night. Meanwhile, Detective Morrison called again with news. "We've started uncovering Julia's full financial trail," she said. "Carlos was her accomplice in more than just this." My stomach tightened. "More?" "She's been draining small amounts from multiple relatives for over a year. Distant cousins, old neighbors, credit lines opened in other people's names, identity theft disguised as family favors." "That doesn't sound like desperation," I said. "That sounds like planning." "Exactly." End quote. Apparently, Julia had positioned herself as a caretaker or helper, offering to manage bills for our elderly aunt, handle tax returns for a cousin with disabilities. She built trust, then drained accounts. Quietly. Bit by bit. She had a strategy, Morrison said. Carlos helped her with the technical side routing transfers through dummy LLCs, cryptocurrency exchanges, untraceable withdrawals. "Is there any money left?" "Unlikely," Morrison said. "But we've frozen assets. Found an apartment in Flagstaff under Carlos's name rented just last month. It was empty when we got there, but the lease and utilities are in both their names. There were plans, blueprints, a whole new life in Cabo San Lucas." Olivia walked in just then, hearing the last words. "She was going to leave the country?" she asked. I put the phone on speaker so Morrison could answer. "She was going to disappear, yes," the detective said. "You speaking up changed that." It sprayed on. Olivia didn't say anything for a while. Then, good. That evening, Morrison brought over a box of evidence copies of everything for our records. Inside were printed texts between Julia and Carlos. Olivia read them silently, then passed one to me. It read, "She'll break. She's soft like her mom. Give it time." I folded the paper neatly, placed it back in the box, and closed the lid. "We're not soft," I said. Olivia gave a tiny nod. "We're steel." End quote. End quote. End quote. We made dinner together for the first time in weeks, just pasta and salad, nothing fancy. But the act of cooking side by side, stirring sauce, arguing over the right amount of garlic, it felt like reclaiming something, a ritual, a rhythm. Afterward, we sat on the porch, warm cups of tea in our hands. "Mom," Olivia said after a while, "do you think she ever loved me? Really?" I took a long sip before answering. "I think she loved what you represented. Innocence, trust, a future she felt she lost. But that's not love." "No," I said, "not the kind that protects you. Not the kind that chooses you over greed." She nodded slowly. "Good." We watched the stars emerge one by one, scattered across the vast Arizona sky. The porch light cast a soft circle of glow around us, safe and still. And in that moment, I let myself believe for the first time that we were going to be okay. The first time I saw Julia again was in the courtroom. It had been 3 weeks since her arrest. 3 weeks of Olivia slowly reclaiming her peace. 3 weeks of me trying to convince myself that I wouldn't fall apart when I finally looked my sister in the eye again. But there I was, seated in the gallery, hands clenched in my lap, watching as they brought her in through the side door shackled, shoulders squared, wearing that same smug defiance I'd seen in the garage. She looked thinner, maybe more tired, but she still held herself like the world owed her something. Carlos wasn't in the room. His hearing had been postponed due to a separate fraud case in New Mexico. But Julia was front and center, her lawyer at her side, facing multiple charges and the first formal hearing for pre-trial motions. I expected her to glance at me, maybe flinch, maybe even offer some pathetic attempt at apology. But when her eyes finally found mine, she smiled. A slow, knowing smile, as if to say, "You think you've won, but I still have something left to take." I turned away, refusing to let her see the tremble in my jaw. The judge was a silver-haired woman named Evelyn Price, reputed for her no-nonsense demeanor and sharp command of courtroom order. She read each charge aloud with a voice like iron. Kidnapping, attempted murder, identity theft, conspiracy to defraud, and multiple counts of financial exploitation. Julia's attorney tried to push back. He painted her as emotionally unstable, desperate, devastated by a lifetime of family neglect. He hinted at mental health struggles. claimed her actions, while serious, were acts of pain, not malice. When Judge Price asked Julia if she had anything to say, she rose slowly and faced the courtroom. "I made mistakes," she said. "I was drowning, and no one in my family threw me a rope." The room was silent. Then she looked at me. "But I never meant to hurt Olivia. I loved her like she was my own." That was the moment Olivia stood. I didn't expect it. No one did. She walked to the edge of the gallery, eyes locked on Julia, voice firm. "You didn't love me. You used me. You starved me. You tied me to a chair and told me my mom abandoned me. That's not love." Julia's face darkened. "You said I had to choose between your freedom and my life," Olivia continued. "You told me if I signed those papers you'd let me go, but I knew you were lying. I knew you wanted to bury me." Judge Price raised a hand. "Miss Brennan, this is highly irregular." But Olivia turned to her, eyes fierce. "I needed to say it, because she won't stop unless someone makes her." The courtroom was frozen. Judge Price looked at Julia, then back at Olivia. "Consider it said," she finally replied. "And thank you." Olivia sat back down next to me, and I reached for her hand. Julia didn't speak again after that. The judge denied all requests for bail modification. Trial was officially scheduled for 6 weeks from that day. Outside, in the hallway, Morrison approached us with a grim but proud smile. "She's rattled," she said. "That shook her. You shook her." I looked at my daughter, still trembling slightly, but standing tall. "She's stronger than all of us," I said. That night, back home, Olivia finally allowed herself to cry. Not out of fear, but release. And I held her through it, knowing full well that healing isn't linear. Some nights would still feel like the garage, but now we had light. The next morning, I opened the mailbox and found a thin envelope addressed in Julia's handwriting. No return address, just my name. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It read, "You turned her against me, but blood remembers. One day, she'll see what you really are." No apology. No remorse. Just venom. I didn't show Olivia. I burned the letter in the sink and watched the smoke rise, curling like ghosts I refused to let haunt us anymore. The letter haunted me more than I wanted to admit. Not because I believed a word of it Julia had lost the right to accuse or define me long ago, but because it reminded me that, even locked away, she still knew how to get under my skin. One sentence. That's all it took. One sentence to bring the weight of a lifetime of wounds crashing back in. But I didn't let it show. Olivia never saw the letter. I wouldn't let her. Instead, I focused on rebuilding the world Julia tried to destroy. We installed a new security system, cameras, smart locks, motion sensors. The officers who had once guarded our house were reassigned, but the badge sticker in the window remained. A silent warning to anyone watching. Not this house, not again. Olivia went back to school the following week. She insisted. "I need to try," she said. "If I don't go back now, I'll never go back." 8-1. I walked her to the front door that morning. She wore jeans, a loose flannel, and a worn leather backpack with a keychain that used to be mine in college, a tiny Arizona cactus. She didn't smile, but she didn't cry either. That was progress. The school counselor had arranged a light schedule, some remote days, and a standing appointment if she needed to talk. Her friends welcomed her quietly, their smiles unsure, their hugs tentative. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. They'd all seen the news. And even if they hadn't, Olivia's story had traveled. By midweek, she was exhausted. But she went back again, and again. Each morning a battle, each evening a small victory. I took comfort in the little things. The way she hummed while brushing her hair, the sudden craving for cherry ice cream at 9 p.m., the way she rolled her eyes when I asked if she needed help with math homework. My daughter was returning. And yet, behind that return, a question lingered. What if Julia tries again? Detective Morrison had warned me. "She might reach out," she said. "In jail, it's letters. From prison, well, people have their ways." "Can she actually do anything from inside?" I'd asked. "Not directly," Morrison replied. "But people like Julia manipulators, they find angles. They find weak links." It was then she told me something that chilled me. "Carlos hasn't flipped." I blinked. "What?" "He's still playing dumb," says Julia misled him. "That he didn't know about Olivia, didn't know about the fraud, didn't know about anything. And unfortunately, his fingerprints are harder to place on some of the evidence. So he could walk? Morrison sighed. Maybe not walk, but lighter sentencing. A plea deal, maybe. If the DA thinks it's cleaner that way. I gritted my teeth. He helped her. He watched her do it. I know, but we need something more. In Describe, that night, I stayed up reading every one of Julia's old text messages, the ones Morrison had copied for me in the evidence box. Some were routine, some filled with delusion, some made my skin crawl. But one stood out, dated 2 days before I came home from Hawaii. If she comes back early, Plan B. I stared at the message. There had never been a Plan B mentioned anywhere else. I texted Morrison, sent her a photo of the printed message. She replied within minutes. Interesting. That message didn't come from Julia's phone. That one came from Carlos's. So he had been making plans. I called her. What's Plan B? We don't know yet, she admitted. But if he had one, and he never used it, it might still be out there. I looked around my house, the cameras, the locks, the lights, and suddenly they didn't feel like enough. What if someone else was involved? I asked. Someone we missed. We're checking every contact, Morrison said. But it's possible Julia wasn't just working with Carlos. If she had a second partner, or even just someone she manipulated, we'll find them. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. After I hung up, I stood at the window and stared out into the night. The desert was quiet, still. The air warm, dry, humming with crickets. But something didn't feel right. And deep down, I knew we weren't finished yet. The next morning, something strange happened. Olivia came down for breakfast, hair damp from the shower, dressed in her usual oversized hoodie, but her eyes were wide, unsettled. I had a weird message on my phone, she said, placing it on the counter, from a number I don't recognize. My blood turned cold. What kind of message? She unlocked the screen and showed me. It was just 3 words. You still remember? No punctuation, no name, nothing else. The timestamp was 2:43 a.m. Did you reply? I asked, already knowing the answer. She shook her head. No, I just blocked it. I grabbed the phone, forwarded the screenshot to Detective Morrison, then looked at Olivia. Do you think it was her? I don't know, she said. It didn't feel like her. That was the part that chilled me. Because she was right. Julia's messages were always longer. Messier. Desperate or cruel, but never vague. This was something else. Morrison called me back minutes later. Get her phone to me, she said. We'll pull the metadata. If this was sent through a masked app or spoofed, we'll trace it. I'm scared, I admitted. What if this is something new? That's what we need to find out. Olivia handed her phone over without question. Morrison arrived in person, scanned it forensically right there in our living room, and nodded grimly after checking the source. It's a masked SMS app, very hard to trace unless they slip up. Could it be Carlos? I asked. Possibly. Or someone else. I blinked. You think someone's helping them? Still? Morrison pursed her lips. I think it's strange this message came now, just after Carlos's hearing date was moved, and after Julia's trial schedule got pushed 2 weeks. So they're stalling, I whispered. Or waiting. That word echoed. Waiting. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Olivia. Every noise outside made my skin crawl. The porch light flickered at 1 a.m., and I sat by the window until sunrise, gripping the baseball bat Paul kept by the back door. The next day, Morrison called with something else. We found an offshore transaction connected to Carlos's alias transferred 5 days before the arrest, she said. Not much, just 20 grand, but it went to an unknown recipient using the name E.M. I frowned. E.M.? Do you think that's a real person? We're checking every connection, Morrison said, but it could be a failsafe, a backup contact. If Julia and Carlos had someone else on the outside, this might be their lifeline. You think that's who texted Olivia? It's possible, and if that's true, we're not dealing with just the 2 of them anymore. The floor under my feet felt less stable. That evening, Olivia asked if she could sleep in my room. She hadn't done that since she was 9. I didn't hesitate. We made up a little bed on the floor beside mine, and as she settled in, she whispered, I don't want to be scared forever. You won't be, I promised, brushing her hair back. Fear only wins if we let it stay. She closed her eyes. Later that night, while she slept, I opened Paul's old lockbox, the one he kept hidden in the closet under our winter coats. Inside were his journals, a few handwritten letters, and our family documents. And something else. A copy of a notarized document Julia had once asked him to co-sign 5 years ago, a loan application she'd later claimed was denied. Only now I realized it hadn't been denied. Paul had rejected it. He'd written on the back in blue pen, "Too risky, not trustworthy. She's not telling us the truth." I held the paper, my hands trembling. Even back then, he'd seen it. He'd known. I wondered how much pain we could have avoided if I'd just listened more carefully, read between the lines. But I couldn't change the past. All I could do now was make sure the future didn't belong to Julia, or Carlos, or whoever EM was. As the sun began to rise outside, I whispered to myself, too soft for Olivia to hear, "This ends with me." By the time morning light streamed through the bedroom window, I had already made up my mind. I wasn't waiting anymore. No more watching from the sidelines while Julia's shadow slithered through our lives. No more waiting for Morrison's team to connect every dot. I needed to know who EM was, and I needed to know now. After Olivia left for her half-day of school, her eyes brighter, posture steadier, I drove straight to the county records office. I'd remembered something while lying awake the night before. A conversation Julia and I had years ago, after our mother passed away. She'd mentioned opening a business in someone else's name to bypass her poor credit score. "I used initials," she'd laughed. "It makes me sound important." I asked the clerk to pull up any local filings under the initials EM from the past 5 years. There were 6 matches. One of them was a business license filed under the name EM Haven Solutions, registered to an address just outside Scottsdale, a P.O. box connected to a UPS store. The registrant's name? Elise Monroe. It hit me like a punch to the chest. Elise, Julia's childhood best friend. We hadn't spoken in over a decade. The last I heard, she'd moved to Flagstaff, gotten into some shady investments, and fallen off the map. I drove home immediately and called Morrison. "Elise Monroe," I told her. "She's EM." There was a pause. "I'll run her," Morrison said. "If she's involved, she just became part of a conspiracy. And if she sent that message to Olivia, she's crossed the line." 3 hours later, Morrison called back. "Elise is on our radar now," she confirmed. Her phone pinged near Olivia's school the night before that text was sent. She has no children, no reason to be near a high school, no listed employment. But she's received wire transfers linked to one of Carlos's dummy accounts. My hands tightened on the kitchen counter. "She's the backup," I whispered. "She's the threat," Morrison corrected. "And we're issuing a warrant." That night, I sat Olivia down. "There's someone else," I told her. "A woman named Elise Monroe. She was close with Aunt Julia. We think she might have been helping them. She could have been the one who texted you." Olivia blinked, then swallowed hard. "So it's not over." "It's not," I admitted. "But we're getting closer." She nodded slowly, eyes shadowed with the weight of it all. "I don't want to live in fear anymore." "You won't," I promised, "because now we know. And knowing gives us power." The next morning, Morrison arrived at the house in person. "Elise fled," she said. "Last night. She must have sensed we were closing in, left her apartment, emptied her account, shut off her phone. But we have security footage. We know she bought a one-way bus ticket to El Paso." I felt the familiar sting of frustration rise. "So what now?" "We've alerted border control, but more importantly, she's now officially linked, which means Julia's case just got a lot stronger. Multiple conspirators, financial trails, witness intimidation," end quote. "It's saving paces, no, there's never one." "Can Olivia testify?" "She may not have to, but her statement combined with the messages, the bank records, and now this attempt to flee, it's enough." I nodded. "Then we hold the line." That night, Olivia and I sat on the porch again, wrapped in sweaters, a cool autumn wind rustling the mesquite trees. She sipped her tea quietly, then asked, "Mom? Yeah? Do you think she ever really thought she'd get away with it?" I stared into the dark. "I think people like Julia convince themselves that they deserve what they're stealing, and once you believe you deserve something, you stop seeing it as a crime." Olivia looked down. "That's sad." "It is," I said. "But it doesn't excuse it. She leaned her head on my shoulder again, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something new, not just survival, not just resilience, closure, slowly forming at the edges. Julia was behind bars. Carlos was implicated. Elise was on the run. And we were still standing. It was a Wednesday morning when Morrison called with the words I'd been waiting to hear. We got her. I didn't need to ask who. Elise? I said, breath held. She crossed back into Arizona overnight, Morrison said. Border Patrol flagged her ID during a random bus check just outside of Douglas. She had a fake name on her ticket, but she used her real ID to board. We've got her in custody. I closed my eyes, relief hitting like a wave. Was she armed? Did she resist? No weapons, no drama. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She didn't say much, but she had a phone with her. And you're going to want to hear this. I leaned against the kitchen counter, heart pounding. On that phone we found video messages, Morrison said. They were intended for Carlos, drafts she never sent, but in one of them she references Olivia. What does she say? She says, the girl was supposed to sign. If she just signed, none of this would have happened. A cold chill ran through me. Do you think she ever meant to let Olivia go? No, Morrison said simply. Not once Elise got involved. Julia might have lied to herself, but Elise? She was in it for the payout. I hung up and walked outside to where Olivia was sitting on the patio, curled up with a book and a blanket. She looked up at me, sensing the shift in my energy. What is it? They found Elise, I said. She's in custody. And they found something. A video. She admitted it was about you. Olivia blinked. So it's real. Everything we thought. Yes, I said. And now they have her. All three of them. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but instead, she just exhaled, long, slow, like a pressure valve finally released. They can't hurt us anymore, she whispered. No, I said. They can't. The following week brought preparation meetings with the district attorney's office. Olivia's statement would be read in court. They didn't want to force her to testify in person unless absolutely necessary, too much risk, too much trauma. But her words would be heard. I sat in the room while she practiced reading them aloud with the victim's advocate. She began, My name is Olivia Brennan. I'm 17 years old. I was kidnapped and held in my own garage for 7 days by my aunt and her accomplices. I was tied, starved, and manipulated. I was told my mother abandoned me. I was told my life depended on giving away my family's home. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. I survived, not because they let me, but because I didn't break. Tears streamed down my face as she finished. The advocate smiled gently. You're stronger than most grown adults I know. Olivia didn't smile, but her chin lifted slightly. I just want them to hear it. Later, Morrison confirmed that all three, Julia, Carlos, and Elise, were being tried separately to avoid collusion. Julia's trial would begin first, as she was the primary defendant in the kidnapping and financial crimes. Carlos was next, followed by Elise. The community had started to pay attention too. News stories circulated online. Family betrayal in Phoenix, teen held by aunt and inheritance plot, and kidnapping for property. Shocking Arizona case heads to trial. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years stopped me at the store, offering hugs, condolences, disbelief. Some admitted they always thought Julia was a little off, but no one had imagined this. One woman said, Your daughter's so brave, I don't think I could have survived that. I replied, Neither did they. A week before the trial, Morrison dropped off a box of remaining evidence that no longer needed to be kept in custody. I placed it in the garage, now clean, freshly painted, and filled with storage bins instead of ghosts. But one item caught my eye before I sealed the box. Olivia's bracelet. It was silver, with a tiny charm shaped like a heart. Julia had given it to her for her 12th birthday. Olivia used to wear it every day until that week. I walked back inside and handed it to her. She stared at it for a moment, then took it gently and slipped it onto her wrist. Not for her, she said quietly. For me. To remind myself I got out. And with that, we moved one step closer to the trial, to the truth, to the final reckoning. The courtroom was full. Journalists, locals, legal interns scribbling into notepads, a few strangers who just came to witness something raw, real, and gruesome, like they were here for theater, not justice. But I didn't see any of them. I saw Olivia. She sat beside me in the front row, dressed simply in navy blue. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes steady, her fingers laced with mine. She looked more like a woman than a girl. She had earned every inch of that steel in her spine. Julia entered, flanked by 2 officers. She wore a charcoal gray suit, court issued. Her hair had grown out a bit, but she still had that same self-righteous tilt to her chin. For a brief moment, her eyes scanned the room and stopped on Olivia. She didn't smirk this time. She looked away. Maybe even she couldn't meet the eyes of the girl she'd locked in a garage for 7 days. The trial began with opening arguments. The prosecutor, Miss Jennifer Calloway, was sharp, seasoned, and relentless. She laid it all out for the jury. The conspiracy, the fraud, the kidnapping, the psychological abuse, the motive greed cloaked in bitterness. She did not act out of desperation, Calloway said, pacing slowly. She acted out of entitlement. She believed her sister owed her a life she couldn't build on her own, so she tried to take it piece by piece, starting with her niece. Julia's defense was more erratic. Her lawyer painted a picture of a woman mentally unwell, who had suffered years of abandonment, financial ruin, and emotional instability. They claimed she had never meant real harm, that Olivia's captivity was a misunderstood disciplinary act that spiraled out of control. That word disciplinary made me grip Olivia's hand so tightly she winced. I loosened my grip, whispered, "Sorry," but she shook her head. "Don't," she whispered back. "Hold on." End quote. Over the next few days, the trial unfolded like a slow-moving horror film. Crime scene photos, bank records, testimony from financial experts who traced the fraudulent transfers, phone records between Julia and Carlos. Then came the hardest part. Olivia's statement was read aloud by the victim's advocate. Even though Olivia had approved it, hearing those words spoken aloud made her shrink back slightly in her seat. But she didn't look away, not once. She was locked in a dark, unventilated space during the hottest part of the Arizona summer, the advocate read. She was denied food and water. She was told her mother had abandoned her, that no one was coming. She was told the only way out was to give up her family's home. A juror wiped her eyes. Julia sat still. No tears, no reaction, no apology. On the 4th day, Detective Morrison took the stand. She was calm and commanding, laying out every piece of evidence with precision. When asked if there was any indication that Julia regretted her actions, Morrison replied, "There's no evidence of remorse, only calculation." Her texts showed timing, her withdrawals showed planning. Her video calls with Carlos showed they were planning a new life with money stolen from her own family. Then Morrison held up one item entered into evidence, the unsigned property deed. This is what she wanted, and when she didn't get it, she escalated. That night, Olivia barely spoke. We sat on the couch, TV playing quietly, untouched dinner on the table. She finally said, "She didn't even look sorry." "She's not," I said, "but she's exposed, and that's more important." The next day, Julia testified. Her tone was rehearsed, her words carefully chosen. She told the jury she'd snapped, that she felt abandoned by everyone in her life, that she thought Olivia needed structure and she took it too far. She didn't say sorry. She said unfortunate. "I feel a disonerier in fine-lighted." She said mistake. She said misjudgment. Not once did she say what she did. When the prosecutor pressed her about the texts, the planning, the forged documents, Julia deflected. "They were Carlos's ideas," she said. "I was just going along." But Morrison had already shown the jury dozens of messages in Julia's voice, in Julia's own handwriting. And then came the final blow. A surprise witness, a woman named Karen Fields. She was Julia's former landlord in Flagstaff. She testified that Julia had discussed taking over her sister's estate more than a year ago. She said she'd found a way to fix her life, Karen said, that her sister wouldn't see it coming, that once the kid signed, she'd disappear. That was it. The courtroom was silent. Even the defense lawyer looked rattled. Back home, Olivia exhaled and asked, "Is it enough?" "Yes," I said, believing it for the first time. "It's enough." End quote. Other browned. The verdict came on a Friday afternoon, under a sky so cloudless it felt mocking. We sat in the courtroom, every breath tight in our chests. Olivia beside me, hands clasped in her lap, Morrison behind us, a quiet pillar of calm. I didn't dare look at Julia. The jury filed in. 12 strangers who had spent the last 10 days unraveling the worst moments of our lives. The judge asked the foreperson to stand. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "Yes, Your Honor." I'm Cervantes. My heart was pounding so loud I could hardly hear. "In the matter of the state of Arizona versus Julia Brennan," he cleared his throat. "On the charge of kidnapping in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. "On the charge of attempted murder, we find the defendant guilty." I closed my eyes. "On the charge of fraud and identity theft, we find the defendant guilty." Olivia gripped my hand. "On the charge of conspiracy to defraud, we find the defendant guilty." Each word landed like a thunderclap. The judge thanked the jury and turned to Julia. "Sentencing will be set in accordance with state guidelines. Due to the nature of the charges, bail is denied. The defendant will remain in custody." Julia didn't move, didn't blink. No tears, no outbursts, just that same cold distance she'd always used like armor. But as they led her away, cuffed and silent, she looked back, not at me, at Olivia. I thought maybe she'd mouth something, some pathetic plea for forgiveness, some attempt to reclaim the last shred of humanity. She didn't. And Olivia didn't look away. Outside, the air was warm and dry, the kind of phoenix heat that wraps around you like wool. Olivia and I walked to the car in silence, both of us stunned, weightless. In the passenger seat, she whispered, "It's over." "Almost," I said. "There's still sentencing." "End of you." "But the jury believed me," she said, voice steadier now. "They believed what she did. They saw the truth," I said. "And that matters." We didn't go home right away. We drove. Nowhere in particular, just drove. Past the desert stretches where the saguaro cacti stood like silent sentinels. Past the strip malls, the old taco stand we used to visit on Saturdays, the high school football field Olivia once ran across barefoot after winning her first game. Eventually, we ended up in a little park on the edge of the city's South Mountain. We walked to a bench and sat, watching the sun begin to dip low in the sky. Olivia looked out at the hills, her voice quiet. "Do you think she was ever really going to let me go?" I paused. I think she told herself she would. But deep down, no. She needed you, and not in the way people need family, in the way thieves need leverage. Olivia nodded slowly. "That's what I thought. Really times now him," and quote. After a long pause, she added, "I'm glad I didn't break." "You didn't," I said. "You bent, you cracked, but you never broke." She smiled faintly, then leaned against me. We stayed there until the sun sank below the horizon, and for the first time in months, the quiet felt peaceful, not dangerous. Back home, I made her favorite dinner, real dinner, not soup or toast or anything soft, chicken enchiladas, spicy and cheesy, the way Paul used to make them. Olivia ate 2 plates. I set aside the dishes and sat across from her. "What now?" she asked. I thought for a moment. "Now we start building again?" I said. "Brick by brick. But this time, we build stronger." "And what about Carlos? Elise?" "They're next," I said. "Carlos's trial starts next month. Elise, after that." But this was the heart of it. Julia was the architect. "She built a house on lies," Olivia murmured. "And it collapsed," I finished. That night, as we got ready for bed, Olivia opened her drawer and pulled out something I hadn't seen in a long time, her journal. She tucked herself into bed and began to write, her pen moving slowly but steadily across the page. I didn't ask what she was writing. I didn't need to. I simply whispered from the doorway, "Good night, baby." And she whispered back, "Good night, Mom." For the first time in what felt like forever, we both slept through the night. The morning after the verdict, I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and a strange sensation that something was missing. Then I realized it was the fear. For weeks, I'd lived with a knot in my stomach. That ever-present dread Julia would slip through the cracks, that justice would falter. But now she was behind bars, convicted, exposed. The silence in the house felt different now, not ominous, just quiet, peaceful. I got up, brewed coffee, and stood at the kitchen window watching the desert wind dance through the trees. Olivia came downstairs in pajama pants and her Team Brennan's t-shirt, an old inside joke between her, Paul, and me. She hadn't worn it since the ordeal. "Hey," she said, her voice still morning rough. "Hey, you," I replied. "Hungry?" She nodded, and I made scrambled eggs while she sliced fruit. A mundane ritual, but it felt sacred somehow. Like we were stitching normal back into our lives, one breakfast at a time. Afterward, we sat on the porch with our mugs. Olivia had her journal in her lap. She'd been writing a lot lately, and I didn't ask what. That was hers. Sacred ground. "Do you think she'll try to contact us again?" she asked quietly. "No," I said. "She's been stripped of visitation, phone privileges. She's not even allowed to write letters." "Good." She took a sip of her tea and looked out toward the horizon. "Mom?" "Yeah?" "When the trials are over, when all this is behind us, what do we do?" I turned to her. "We live." She gave a small smile. "Like, really live?" "Yes," I said. "We take trips. Go back to that bookstore in Sedona you loved. You finish school. Maybe you write that novel you've been hiding from me since you were 12. She laughed, a real one, and it was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in months. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Always." "I don't hate her, Julia." End quote. End quote. I blinked. "You don't?" She shook her head. "I hate what she did. I hate how she made me feel. But hating her doesn't make me feel stronger. It just keeps me connected to her." I nodded slowly, proud and stunned all at once. "That's wisdom," I said. "You're allowed to let go." "I'm trying," she said, "every day." Later that week, I got a call from the Victims Assistance Program. They wanted to offer Olivia a scholarship, part of a new state initiative to support teens affected by violent crime. When I told her, she stared at me for a moment. "Do you think I deserve it?" she asked. "You survived what would have broken most adults," I said. "And you told the truth when it mattered most. You don't just deserve it, Olivia, you earned it." She accepted. 2 days later, Morrison called. "Carlos took a plea," she said. 6 years. Testifying against Elise and Julia in full. But they agree. 6 years? I asked, heart twisting. "That's it?" "It's not perfect," Morrison said, "but he's providing testimony that could extend Elise's sentence, and with Julia already convicted, it solidifies her network." I hated it, but I understood. "What about Elise?" I asked. "Her trial's next month, but she's already cracking." Carlos flipped first. She might follow. After I hung up, I walked into the garage. It was spotless now. Repainted, empty, no shadows. But I kept one box tucked high on a shelf, sealed tight. Inside it were copies of the court documents, newspaper clippings, evidence photos, and Olivia's original statement. Proof of what we'd been through, a record of how we'd come out the other side. Some scars you don't erase. You preserve them, so you never forget what you survived. That night, Olivia came to me with a folded sheet of paper. "A short story," she said. "Want to read it?" I sat on the couch and unfolded the page. It began with one line. She thought she could lock me away, but she forgot the door was made of paper and I was made of fire. When I looked up, Olivia was watching me with cautious hope. "It's beautiful," I said, my throat thick. "It's fierce." She smiled. "I think I'm finally ready," she said. And for the first time since our nightmare began, I believed her. Autumn arrived slowly in Phoenix, the desert heat loosening its grip 1 degree at a time. The mornings grew cooler, shadows longer, and for the first time in a long while, Olivia and I opened the windows without worrying who might be watching from the street. With Julia behind bars and Carlos officially sentenced, a new kind of quiet settled over our lives. It wasn't just the absence of danger, it was the return of rhythm, of routine, of things once taken for granted. School, work, dinner, laughter. Healing doesn't arrive like a trumpet blast. It comes in soft steps, like the way Olivia stopped flinching when someone knocked on the door, or how she no longer triple-checked the locks before bed. She started writing more. Her stories filled notebooks and spilled into typed pages she let me read over coffee. Most of them were fiction, but I could see the traces of our story in them, the claustrophobia, the betrayal, the sharp resilience woven through every line. Then, one Saturday morning, a package arrived at our door. No return address, just our last name typed neatly on the label, Brennan. I stared at it for a moment before calling Morrison. She sent an officer within the hour. The box was scanned, inspected, and carefully opened in our driveway. Inside? Books. Old ones. Our mother's. Hardcover classics she'd collected for decades. Dickens, Faulkner, Toni Morrison. They'd gone missing years ago during Julia's first financial collapse. She'd claimed they were lost in a move. But here they were. A note lay on top, written in tight, unfamiliar handwriting. She kept them in storage. Said one day she'd sell them when you were gone. I thought maybe you should have them back. A friend. There was no signature. Morrison couldn't trace the sender. Might have been someone Carlos knew, or someone Elise used, she speculated, or maybe even a guilt-stricken acquaintance. Either way, it's over now. I brought the books inside and lined them up on the shelf where they belonged. That afternoon, Olivia and I curled up on the couch and read aloud from Beloved, a story about trauma and ghosts, and how some things haunt us long after they're gone. And still, we read. A week later, Morrison called again. Elise pled guilty, she said. 3 charges. She'll serve 10 years. With Carlos's and Julia's sentences, that's the full triad. And no appeals? No, she said. We closed the door on them. It's scribe. After I hung up, I sat on the porch, phone in hand, heart slowly easing into peace. We had survived the storm. Not just endured it, survived it, and built something stronger in its place. That evening, Olivia found me outside and sat next to me. I was thinking, she said, when I turn 18, I want to write an op-ed about what happened, not just the crime, but the aftermath, the silence, the survival. I turned to her, surprised. You sure? She nodded. I think someone needs to hear it. Maybe someone who's still locked in their own garage, in some way. I reached over and took her hand. I think that's brave, I said. She smiled. I think it's time. Before bed, we lit a candle and placed it by the window. Not for Julia, not for Carlos, not for Elise, but for the girl who survived, and the woman she was becoming. 2 months later, Olivia's op-ed was published in a Sunday edition of the Arizona Republic. The title was simple, but it hit like thunder. The garage had no windows, but I learned to see in the dark. She had written it herself, every word. I'd only read a draft the day before it went live, half afraid to open it, half proud beyond words. It wasn't just a survivor's story, it was a declaration. A warning to predators, a comfort to the silenced, a tribute to the ones who lived through the unthinkable and came out whole. In it, she never mentioned Julia by name, never detailed the worst parts of what had happened. Instead, she focused on the feeling of being trapped, of questioning whether love can exist inside betrayal, of choosing deliberately not to let 1 week define an entire lifetime. I didn't survive to remain silent, she wrote in the final line. I survived so no one else would have to do it alone. It was picked up by national outlets within 48 hours. CNN called. NPR reached out. A nonprofit for victim advocacy sent Olivia an invitation to speak at their annual summit in New York City. She stared at the email for a long time before whispering, "They want me to talk." "You don't have to," I said. "I want to," she replied. "For the first time, I really want to." We flew out the following month, her first time on a plane since the trip to Hawaii we never finished. At the summit, Olivia stood on stage in a simple navy dress, her words echoing across a room filled with women, survivors, advocates, people who knew too well what it meant to lose something and fight like hell to take it back. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She spoke with the steadiness of someone who had found her footing again. When she finished, the room rose to its feet. Tears, applause, hands clapping over hearts. And when she returned to her seat, she looked at me, eyes shining not with pride, but with purpose. "I think this is what I want to do," she said. "Not just write, but help." "You already are," I whispered. Back home, the garage became something new. We turned it into a small study. Bookshelves, a desk, a couch, a rug. Olivia picked out herself, bright coral and teal, colors of fire and sky. On the wall, she hung a framed quote from the op-ed. "You can bury a seed or a body." I chose to grow. People began writing to her emails, letters, social media messages, survivors, families, strangers who had followed our story and felt seen for the first time. She answered every one. Some were brief, Some turned into long exchanges. One woman wrote, "Your words pulled me out of a place I didn't think I could leave." Olivia read it aloud to me one night, then sat in silence, holding the letter to her chest. "This is why I survived," she said. I reached over and brushed a tear from her cheek. "You survived," I said, "because you were always meant to be more than what they tried to make you." The next morning, we received a call from Paul's oncologist. "He's in remission," the doctor said. I almost dropped the phone. Tears burst from my eyes before I could process the joy. I ran to Olivia, shouting, laughing, sobbing. "He's going to be okay," I cried. "Your dad, he's going to be okay." We flew out to see him 2 days later. Olivia ran into his arms at the hospital. Paul, thinner but glowing, wrapped her in a hug so tight I thought he'd never let go. "My girl," he whispered. "My brave, brave girl." Later, as we sat by his bed, Paul looked at me and said, "You held everything together." "No," I said, squeezing his hand. "She did." When we flew back to Phoenix, it felt different. Brighter, lighter, like the past had finally loosened its grip, and the future was no longer something we tiptoed toward. It was ours, and we were ready. Spring came early that year. The desert bloomed in quiet defiance, pale yellow brittlebush, fiery ocotillo, the scent of creosote after the first warm rain. It was as if the world had decided we deserved a season of beauty, of breath, of becoming. On a Saturday morning in April, Olivia and I stood in front of our house, planting a young tree, a jacaranda. She'd picked it out herself. "For shade," she said, "and purple flowers." I think, as she dug, I watched her hands stronger now, steadier. The same hands that once trembled against mine in that hospital bed. The same hands that wrote the words that changed people's lives. Behind her, the garage door stood open. Inside, books, light, color. No chains, no shadows. The past still lived there, in memory. But memory, we'd learned, didn't have to be a prison. It could be a garden. Paul came home the following week. We met him at the airport with a sign Olivia made that read, "You survived too." He laughed when he saw it, then cried when he hugged us. We were whole again. Not the same, but whole. In May, Olivia graduated high school. She walked across the stage in her blue robe, tassel swinging, eyes fierce and proud. The audience stood when her name was called, not because they knew the full story, but because somehow they felt it. That night, we hosted a small dinner, just a few close friends, some old neighbors, Paul's brother and his wife. Olivia read a short passage from one of her new stories. There was wine, there was cake, there was joy. Later, after the guests had gone and the house was quiet again, Olivia sat next to me on the porch, the stars bright above us. "Do you ever think about her?" she asked softly. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but not with anger anymore." "Me neither," she said. "I think she gave me something." I turned to her. "She showed me what I never want to become," Olivia continued, "and that's worth remembering." I nodded. "Then we remember, and we keep going." She smiled. "I think I'm ready for college." I smiled back. "I know you are." That summer, we took a road trip, just the two of us. From Phoenix to Santa Fe to Denver, stopping at bookstores and roadside diners, writing postcards to Paul, laughing at bad motel coffee, and listening to old soul records as we crossed state lines. We weren't escaping anything anymore. We were moving forward, reclaiming. By August, Olivia had moved into her dorm. Her desk was covered in pens, notebooks, and a small framed photo of the three of us, her, Paul, and me, taken just 2 weeks before. She hung it above her writing nook, beside a sticky note that simply read, "Your voice matters." On the drive home, I cried. Not from grief, from gratitude. That we made it. That we were still here. That the world, no matter how cruel it can be, still makes space for redemption. Back home, I opened my own laptop. I hadn't written in years. Not really, but the story had been waiting. So I began to type. This isn't a story about a crime. It's a story about a woman who refused to let the darkness win. A story about a girl who grew light inside of her, even in the pitch black. A story about fire and silence, and the way a name loses power once you reclaim your own. Because in the end, Julia didn't win. Not even close. We did. We lived. And in doing so, we made sure no one could ever silence us again. The story teaches us that even in the face of unimaginable betrayal, resilience can be stronger than revenge. It's a reminder that family is not defined by blood, but by loyalty, love, and protection. Through Olivia's survival and her mother's unwavering fight for justice, we learn that healing is possible not because the pain disappears, but because we choose to rise above it. In the end, it's not the darkness that defines us, but how we walk through it and who we become on the other side.